The repair outpost on Velshara had the permanent smell of ozone and scorched metal, a combination that Kale Torrens had learned to ignore after 3 months of breathing it. He crouched beside the primary shield generator, running diagnostics through his handheld scanner while sweat dripped from his nose onto the dust-covered equipment. The planet's 2 suns made every afternoon feel like working inside an oven, and the thin atmosphere meant his lungs burned with every breath. "Kale, the thermal regulator is reading amber again," Zictra called from across the equipment bay. The young Velkari soldier stood nearly 7 feet tall, her chitinous exoskeleton gleaming purple-black in the harsh light. Her 4 arms manipulated tools with the easy dexterity of her species, while her compound eyes tracked multiple data streams simultaneously. "Yeah, I see it," Kale replied, not looking up from his scanner. "It's been running hot since that sandstorm 2 weeks ago. I've got replacement parts on order, but supply convoys aren't exactly prioritizing HVAC components when ammunition is running low." Zictra made a clicking sound that the translator in Kale's ear rendered as concerned amusement. "You humans and your obsession with optimal temperatures. How did your species survive long enough to reach space when you require such narrow environmental parameters?" "Stubbornness mostly." Kale wiped his forehead with his sleeve and stood, his knees popping in protest. At 32, he was already feeling the wear of contract work on frontier worlds. And really good insulation technology. "You Velkari might be comfortable in 100-degree heat, but my ancestors evolved in caves, not volcanic wastes. Velshara is not a volcanic waste. It is a beautiful world with a rich history. Right now it's a beautiful world where people keep shooting at each other over mining rights and ancient territorial claims I don't understand and frankly don't care about." Kale grabbed his water bottle and drained half of it in one pull. "I'm just here to fix things that break. Politics is way above my pay grade." Squad leader Threxva entered the bay, his massive frame blocking most of the doorway. His exoskeleton bore the scars of countless engagements, and his mandibles clicked with irritation as he surveyed the workspace. "The softshell is complaining about heat again." "The softshell is explaining thermodynamics," Kale corrected mildly. He'd learned that rising to Threxva's provocations only encouraged the veteran soldier, and saving you from a complete power failure that would leave this entire outpost exposed. "We survived 3 years of war before your corporation sent engineers. We would survive without you." "Maybe, but you'd be uncomfortable about it." Kale returned to his diagnostic scanner, scrolling through data that meant nothing to anyone without engineering training. "The generator is stable for now, but we're running at 87% efficiency. If we take any hits to the perimeter shields, this thing might overload." Threxva's antennae twitched, which Kale had learned indicated thoughtfulness. "Command reports no enemy activity within 50 kilometers. The insurgents have pulled back to their mountain strongholds. We are in a safe zone." "No such thing as a safe zone in a war," Kale muttered, but he didn't argue further. Threxva had been fighting on Velshara since the conflict began. If the squad leader said they were safe, Kale would take his word for it. He was an engineer, not a soldier. The afternoon stretched into evening, the twin suns painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if Kale hadn't been too tired to appreciate them. He worked alongside Zictra, calibrating sensors and replacing worn components, while Threxva's squad maintained perimeter security. The war felt distant, almost abstract, just the occasional rumble of artillery in the far mountains and the constant chatter of military communications that Kale had learned to tune out. "Tell me about Earth coffee again," Zictra said during a break. She had developed a fascination with human culture that Kale found both endearing and exhausting. "You said it is a beverage that humans consume to increase alertness." "It's a liquid that tastes like burnt regret and keeps you awake through double shifts," Kale explained, pulling up a photo on his data pad. "We're basically addicted to it as a species." I've been in withdrawal for 3 months, and I'm pretty sure it's affecting my personality. I cannot imagine you more irritable than you currently are. That's the caffeine withdrawal talking. Normally I'm delightful. He grinned, and Zictra's antennae waved in the pattern that indicated she found him amusing. The explosion came without warning. One moment Kale was explaining the cultural significance of coffee shops, and the next the world turned white with the flash of a mortar impact. The shockwave threw him sideways into a cargo container hard enough to drive the air from his lungs. His ears rang with a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything except the hammering of his own heartbeat. He pushed himself up on shaking arms, blinking away the spots in his vision. The equipment bay was filled with smoke and the acrid smell of explosives. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Somewhere an alarm was screaming. Zictra, his voice sounded muffled, distant. Threxva. Movement in the smoke. Figures that weren't Velkari, carrying weapons with profiles Kale didn't recognize. His engineering brain cataloged details automatically. Insurgent forces, breaching team, coordinated assault. His survival brain screamed a simpler message: run. But Zictra was on the ground 3 meters away, her purple blood pooling beneath her shoulder. And Kale discovered that his legs wouldn't move in the direction of safety. They moved forward instead, toward the young soldier who'd asked him about coffee and Earth and why humans needed so much water. His hand closed around the nearest heavy object, a torque wrench from his toolkit. The first insurgent came around the cargo container. Kale hit him with the wrench hard enough to feel the impact vibrate up his arm. The insurgent dropped. Kale stood over Zictra, his breathing ragged, his hands shaking, and realized he'd just crossed a line he couldn't uncross. He wasn't an engineer anymore. He was something else, something older and more desperate. More figures appeared in the smoke, weapons rising. Kale dropped the wrench. It wouldn't be enough for what was coming. He clenched his fists, inadequate, fragile human fists, and stepped forward. Threxva's voice roared from somewhere in the chaos. Softshell, get down. But Kale didn't get down. His body had made a decision his mind was still trying to process. He moved toward the enemy like gravity had reversed, like retreat was a word his DNA had forgotten. The second insurgent fired. Kale felt the plasma bolt scorch past his ear, felt his skin blister from the heat. Didn't matter. He closed the distance, drove his shoulder into the insurgent's midsection and felt something crack. Not in him. In them, more shapes in the smoke, more weapons, more targets between him and Zictra. Kale's vision narrowed to a tunnel. His hearing faded to a dull roar. Every civilized thought in his brain shut down, replaced by something ancient and simple. Protect the pack. Fight the threat. Don't stop moving. He didn't realize he was screaming until later, when someone would play back the outpost's security footage and he'd hear the sound coming from his own throat. Not words, not language, just raw human noise. The equipment bay had become hell in miniature. Smoke choked the air, emergency lights strobed across bodies and blood, and the sharp crack of plasma weapons created a rhythm of violence that Kale's mind couldn't fully process. He'd moved past thinking, operating on instinct that millions of years of evolution had hardwired into human nervous systems. An insurgent materialized from the smoke, blade extended. Kale's engineering training cataloged it as a monomolecular edge capable of cutting through armor plating. His survival instinct registered it as a threat and calculated distance, angle, momentum. He twisted sideways, felt the blade slice through his work shirt and draw a line of fire across his ribs. The pain was distant, unimportant. He grabbed the insurgent's weapon arm with both hands and drove his knee upward with every ounce of force his legs could generate. The insurgent made a sound that transcended species, pure agony. Kale ripped the blade from nerveless fingers and threw it away. Weapons required skill he didn't have. His fists, crude as they were, he understood. Kale, fall back. Threxva's voice cut through the chaos. The squad leader was firing controlled bursts from behind an overturned equipment crate. his 4 arms working in perfect coordination to reload and aim simultaneously. "You are unarmored. Unweaponed, you will die." Probably true, some distant part of Kale's mind acknowledged. But Zictra was still down, still bleeding, and 3 more Velkhari soldiers were pinned in the corner of the bay under heavy fire. Running meant abandoning them. Evolution had taught humans many things, but abandoning the pack to save yourself wasn't one of them. Another insurgent came at him, this one larger and wearing combat armor that would deflect anything Kale could throw at it. Logic said retreat. Kale's body said otherwise. He ducked under the first swing, stepped inside the insurgent's guard, and slammed his fist into the vulnerable joint where armor plates met at the neck seal. His knuckles split against the edge of the armor. Didn't matter. The insurgent staggered and Kale hit the same spot again, then a 3rd time until something gave way and the enemy dropped. His hands were bleeding now, split skin revealing raw meat beneath. Each impact sent pain signals screaming up his arms. His brain registered them and discarded them as irrelevant. Pain meant he was alive. Alive meant he could keep fighting. "What are you?" one of the Velkhari soldiers shouted, her translator barely parsing the words through her species' clicking language. She was staring at Kale with all 4 of her compound eyes, mandibles spread wide in what might have been fear or awe. Kale didn't answer, didn't have breath for words. He grabbed a piece of broken equipment, some kind of mounting bracket, and wielded it like a club as 2 more insurgents pushed through the smoke. His movements were neither trained nor elegant. He fought like someone who'd watched too many action movies and then forgot all of it under adrenaline, relying instead on the simple physics of mass times velocity equals broken bones. The bracket connected with an insurgent's head. The insurgent went down and didn't get up. Somewhere in the chaos, Threxva was organizing a counterattack. The surviving Velkhari soldiers rallied, their plasma rifles creating lanes of fire that cut through the enemy assault. But the insurgents had numbers and surprise and superior positioning. The outpost's defensive systems were offline. Communications were dead. This was going to be decided by whatever force could endure longer. Kale took a hit to his left side that felt like being kicked by a horse. He went down hard, rolled with the impact like some half-remembered advice from a training video, and came up already swinging. His fist caught empty air. Then his other fist found a target and he felt cartilage crumple beneath his knuckles. An insurgent's rifle butt caught him across the face. His vision exploded into stars. Blood filled his mouth. He'd bitten through his cheek. He spat red and kept moving forward because backward was death and stillness was death, and the only direction that made any sense was toward the enemy. They were afraid of him now. He could see it in their body language, in the way they hesitated before engaging. Here was this soft-bodied creature with no armor, no weapons, no rational reason to still be standing, and yet he kept coming. It violated their understanding of how combat worked. Kale grabbed an insurgent's weapon, not to fire it but to use as a lever, yanking the enemy off balance and delivering a headbutt that made his skull ring like a bell. Stars filled his vision again. Might have a concussion. Didn't matter. He pushed forward, using his lower center of gravity against taller opponents, using his human endurance against species that had evolved for burst strength rather than sustained effort. His ribs were cracked. He could feel the sharp stabbing pain with each breath. His hands were ruined, split and bleeding, and probably fractured in multiple places. His face was a mask of blood from the rifle hit. Logic said he should be unconscious. His body had stopped listening to logic somewhere around the 3rd or 4th impact. "The softshell fights like the ancient warriors," one of the Velkhari soldiers said, her voice carrying a tone of religious awe. "Like the stories our grandmothers told of the old clans, before technology made us soft." Threxva was suddenly beside Kale, all 4 arms working to lay down covering fire. "You are insane," the squad leader said, his translator rendering his clicking language with unusual precision. "Completely, utterly insane." Yeah, Kale managed to gasp out. His throat was raw from breathing smoke and screaming. Add it to my performance review. Then came the sound that changed everything. The deep roar of military transport engines, heavy assault craft designed to carry entire platoons. The cavalry had arrived. The insurgents broke. Discipline collapsed as they realized they were about to be caught between the outpost survivors and fresh troops. They retreated in disorder, leaving their wounded and dead behind in their haste to escape. Kale stood in the center of the equipment bay, swaying on his feet, and watched them go. His arms hung at his sides, too heavy to lift. His vision was graying at the edges. The adrenaline that had kept him moving was evaporating, leaving behind only pain and exhaustion and the dawning realization of what he'd just done. Heavy footsteps approached. Multiple sets, moving with military precision. Kale turned slowly and found himself facing a Valkyrie of unusual size and bearing. Her exoskeleton was marked with rank insignia he'd only seen in briefing documents. Her 4 arms were held in a gesture he didn't recognize but sensed was important. Behind her stood an entire platoon of elite guards, weapons ready, scanning for threats. Queen Shalavex herself had come to the outpost, and she was staring at Kale like he was something she'd never seen before. The silence stretched. Kale tried to stand straighter, to look professional, to remember that he was just a contractor, and this was actual royalty. His body ignored the attempt at dignity and settled for not falling down. The queen's antennae waved in a complex pattern. Her guards shifted uncomfortably, which seemed wrong because Kale was pretty sure he was the one who should be uncomfortable. "What?" Queen Shalavex said slowly, her translator rendering each word with careful precision. "What exactly did I just witness?" Kale opened his mouth to answer, tasted blood, swallowed it. "Engineering," he finally managed. "With improvisation." Then his knees buckled, and the world went sideways, and he had just enough time to think that this was probably not how you were supposed to meet royalty before darkness took him. Consciousness returned in stages. First pain, sharp and insistent, mapping every injury across Kale's body like a 3-dimensional diagram of poor life choices. Then sound, medical equipment beeping, voices speaking in low tones, the mechanical hum of what he recognized as Valkyrie healing technology. Finally vision, blurry and doubled until he blinked enough times to force his eyes to focus. He was in a medical bay, that much was clear. Not the basic field hospital setup the outpost maintained, but something far more sophisticated. The walls curved in organic patterns, and the air smelled of the antiseptic compounds the Valkyrie used for wound treatment. His hands were encased in regenerative casts that pulsed with soft blue light. His ribs were wrapped in compression bandaging that made breathing painful but possible. "He wakes," a familiar voice said. Zictra appeared in his peripheral vision, her shoulder wrapped in similar healing technology. She looked battered but alive, which was all that mattered. "You're okay," Kale said, his voice rough, speaking hurt, which suggested his throat was damaged from breathing smoke or screaming or both. "I am functional thanks to you." Zictra's antennae waved in the pattern that indicated deep gratitude. "You stood over me while I bled. You fought with your bare hands against armed insurgents. This is not the behavior of an engineer." "Yeah, well, my job description just says other duties as assigned. I'm pretty sure combat falls under that." Kale tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as his ribs informed him, with great emphasis, that movement was a terrible idea. "Do not strain yourself. The medical drones indicate you have sustained 17 distinct injuries, 4 of which would have been fatal to a Valkyrie of equivalent mass." "Humans are hard to kill," Kale said. "We evolved on a planet that really wanted us dead, so we got stubborn about surviving." "Yes," another voice said from the doorway. "I am beginning to understand this about your species." Queen Shalavex entered the medical bay, her royal guards taking up positions outside. She moved with the fluid grace of someone comfortable with her own authority, But there was something in her posture, in the precise angle of her antennae, that suggested she was here for more than a routine inspection. Kale tried to stand, remembered he couldn't, and settled for a nod that made his head throb. "Your Majesty, I apologize for not standing. I'm told it's a bad idea right now. You will remain still and allow your body to heal." The Queen approached his medical bed, studying him with the kind of intense attention usually reserved for complex strategic problems. "I have reviewed the security footage from the attack multiple times, and each time I am forced to confront something that contradicts my understanding of human capability. If this is about protocol violations, I can explain. This is not about protocol." She gestured with one of her 4 arms, and a holographic display materialized above Kale's bed. Security footage from the equipment bay played in stuttering frames, showing him fighting against impossible odds, showing him taking hits that should have ended the engagement, showing him continuing to move forward when any rational being would have retreated. "This," the Queen said, "is about trying to understand what drives a species to fight without claws, without armor, without any of the evolutionary advantages that make warfare survivable." She paused the footage on an image of Kale standing over Zictra's wounded form, fists raised, face bloodied. "What were you thinking in this moment?" Kale studied the image, tried to remember his thought process. "I wasn't thinking." "Not really. Zictra was down. Threxva's squad was pinned. Running would have meant leaving them." "Yes, and preservation of your own life. That was not a consideration." "It was, I just couldn't make myself care about it more than keeping them alive." He looked away from the hologram, meeting the Queen's compound eyes. "I know that doesn't make tactical sense. On the contrary, it makes perfect sense for a species that survived by forming extremely strong pack bonds." The Queen deactivated the hologram. "My military scholars have studied human history. Your people endured ice ages, predators, diseases, and countless environmental pressures that should have driven you extinct. You survived through cooperation and the willingness to sacrifice individual safety for group survival." "We're social animals," Kale agreed. "Most dangerous predator on Earth isn't the one with big teeth. It's the one that works in teams." Threxva entered the medical bay, his massive frame somehow appearing diminished in the Queen's presence. The squad leader's antennae were held in a position Kale had never seen before, something that looked like profound respect mixed with unease. "Your Majesty, the softshell should not be disturbed during healing." "Do not call him that again," Queen Shalavek said quietly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Kale Torrens is not a softshell. He is a human, and that designation now carries implications we must understand." Threxva's mandibles clicked in confusion. "I do not understand, Your Majesty." "Then let me explain what I witnessed." The Queen turned to address both Threxva and Zictra. "I arrived expecting to find a slaughter. Instead, I found evidence of something that our military doctrine does not account for. An unarmored support technician who engaged multiple hostile combatants in close quarters and survived, more than survived. He drove them back through sheer refusal to accept defeat." "He is very stubborn," Zictra offered helpfully. "It is more than stubbornness. It is a biological and cultural adaptation that makes humans uniquely dangerous." The Queen accessed another holographic file, this one showing comparative data on species physiology. "Humans possess remarkable endurance, yes, but more significantly, they possess pain tolerance and adrenaline response systems that allow them to continue functioning through injuries that would incapacitate other species. And culturally, they have developed social bonds so strong that self-sacrifice for the group is considered admirable rather than pathological." Kale listened to himself being analyzed like a piece of equipment. It was surreal and uncomfortable. "I'm really not that special. Any human would have done the same thing." "Yes," the Queen said, "that is precisely what concerns me." She turned back to him. "If any human is capable of what you demonstrated, Then we have been catastrophically underestimating your species' military potential. We classified you as support personnel, technical specialists, non-combatants. We assumed your lack of natural weapons, and armor made you unsuited for warfare. We're not warriors, Kale protested. I'm an engineer, I fix things. You fixed the tactical situation when you engaged enemies that were about to overrun our position, Threxva said quietly. The veteran soldier approached the bed, his posture conveying something that might have been an apology. I called you softshell. I mocked your fragility. I was wrong. You are not fragile. You are differently armored. I don't understand. Your armor is your refusal to quit, the Queen explained. Your weapons are your pack bonds and your willingness to endure pain that would break other species. These are not advantages we account for in our military models because they do not appear in our biology or our culture. She gestured, and a medical drone approached with what looked like official documentation. I am issuing a formal reclassification of human contractors serving with Archonate forces. You are no longer designated as support personnel. The new classification is pending approval from High Command, but I am forwarding my recommendation with priority authorization. What classification? Kale asked, suddenly wary. Combat Auxiliary with Special Operations Potential. The Queen's antennae indicated satisfaction. And I am recommending that future contracts with human engineering firms include explicit combat training protocols. Not because we expect you to fight, but because it appears you will fight regardless of training, and we would prefer you survive the experience. Kale wanted to argue, to explain that he was just one person who'd panicked and gotten lucky, but the security footage made that impossible. He'd done something that contradicted every assumption the Archonate held about human capability, and now he had to live with the consequences. I just wanted to fix shield generators, he muttered. And you still can, Zictra said, her antennae waving with amusement. But now we know that if the shields fail, you might fight off the enemy with a wrench and sheer determination. That is not a viable combat strategy. Perhaps not for us, Queen Shalavek said. But for humans, I am no longer certain what is or is not viable. You have shown me that my understanding of warfare was incomplete. There are weapons beyond claws and energy rifles. There is the weapon of a will that refuses to break. She turned to leave, her guards falling into formation. At the doorway she paused. Rest, Kale Torrens, heal, and when you return to duty, know that the Archonate sees you differently now. You are not simply a contractor. You are a reminder that strength takes many forms, and the most dangerous opponent is the one who will not acknowledge defeat. After she left, silence filled the medical bay. Kale stared at the ceiling, processing everything that had just happened. So, Zictra finally said, about that Earth coffee, do you think it contributes to your species' refusal to quit? Perhaps it is a performance enhancement drug. Despite everything, the pain, the exhaustion, the surreal conversation with royalty, Kale laughed. It hurt his ribs terribly, but he laughed anyway. Yeah, he said, that must be it. We're all just hopped up on caffeine and bad decisions. Then I wish to try this coffee when you return to Earth. If it grants even a fraction of your determination, it would be valuable for morale. Zictra, if I give you coffee, you'll be awake for a week and extremely irritable. Yes, she said, like a human. Kale grinned, tasted blood from his split lip, and decided that maybe being reclassified wasn't the worst thing that could happen. At least now when he got into situations that required improvised violence, it would technically be within his job description. Recovery took longer than Kale wanted and less time than the medical staff recommended. Velkari healing technology was impressive, but it couldn't override the simple fact that human tissue needed time to properly repair itself. 2 weeks of enforced bed rest left him restless and irritable, though the constant stream of visitors helped somewhat. Threxva came daily, bringing reports from the outpost and what passed for apologies among Velkari warriors. The squad leader never directly acknowledged his previous contempt for softshells, but his actions spoke clearly enough. He treated Kale with the same respect he showed veteran soldiers, which was perhaps the highest compliment the gruff warrior knew how to give. Zictra recovered faster, her younger biology and different physiology allowing her to return to light duty within days. She used her free time to research human culture with even more enthusiasm than before, bombarding Kale with questions about everything from Earth's gravity to human mating rituals, the latter of which made him deeply uncomfortable. "I am simply trying to understand if your combat effectiveness correlates with reproductive displays," she explained earnestly. "Many species exhibit increased aggression during mating season." "Humans don't have a mating season," Kale said, rubbing his temples in a gesture that Zictra had learned meant, "This conversation is giving me a headache. We're aggressive year-round. It's kind of our thing." "Fascinating. So the willingness to fight is constant rather than cyclical. Can we please talk about literally anything else?" The most unexpected visitor came on the 8th day of recovery. Kale was attempting physical therapy, carefully moving his healing hands through prescribed exercises, when the medical bay doors opened to admit a delegation of Velkari officers he didn't recognize. Their armor bore markings that indicated high rank, and their posture conveyed the kind of self-importance that made Kale immediately wary. "Kale Torrens," the lead officer said, her translator rendering her clicking language with formal precision. "I am Commander Vixala of the Archonate Strategic Planning Division. I have been authorized to discuss your future deployment with the military." "I'm an engineer with Terran Solutions Corporation," Kale replied carefully. "My deployment is determined by my contract supervisor, not the military. Your contract has been renegotiated." Vixala produced a data pad and handed it to him. "At the request of Queen Shalavex herself, your corporation has agreed to extend your assignment and modify your role. The compensation adjustment is substantial." Kale scrolled through the document, his eyebrows rising as he processed the numbers. Substantial was an understatement. They were offering him 3 times his current salary plus hazard bonuses that suggested they expected him to be in regular combat. "This says I'm being assigned to a rapid response engineering unit attached to the Queen's personal fleet." "Correct. You would accompany military operations to provide technical support and, when necessary, combat assistance." "I'm not a soldier." "No," Vixala agreed. "You are something potentially more valuable. You are a human who has demonstrated capabilities we wish to study and potentially replicate in training protocols for other species." Zictra, who had been quietly observing from the corner, made an excited clicking sound. "Kale will teach us to fight like humans. This is excellent. I wish to learn the headbutt technique." "The headbutt technique is called a terrible idea that will give you a concussion," Kale said. "I don't recommend it. But it was effective. It was desperate, there's a difference." He turned back to Vixala. "I need time to think about this." "Of course. You have 3 days to review the contract and provide your decision." The commander's antennae tilted in what might have been respect. "The Archonate does not compel service. But we hope you will consider that your presence may save lives. Your actions at the outpost certainly saved several." After the delegation left, Kale sat in silence, staring at the contract terms. The money was almost irrelevant, though it was enough to pay off his family's debts and then some. What mattered was the implication that he'd become something other than what he'd set out to be. "You are troubled," Zictra observed. "I came here to build things, to fix infrastructure and help people put their world back together after the fighting stopped. Now they want me to go toward the fighting instead. Is that so different? You will still be helping people. You will simply do so in more immediate circumstances. I could die. You almost died at the outpost. The difference is that now you would be compensated appropriately for the risk." She moved closer, her compound eyes reflecting the medical bay's soft lighting. I do not pretend to understand human psychology, but I know that when I was wounded, you did not calculate probability of survival before acting. You simply acted. That suggests you are someone who runs toward danger rather than away from it. That suggests I'm an idiot. Perhaps, but you are an idiot who saved my life and the lives of my squad mates. If you are going to continue being this type of idiot, you might as well be properly equipped and supported. Kale couldn't argue with her logic, infuriating as it was. The decision became easier 3 days later when he returned to the outpost for the first time since the attack. The equipment bay had been repaired, new generators installed, and defensive systems upgraded to prevent another surprise assault. But what struck Kale most was the way the Velkhari soldiers reacted to his presence. They didn't avoid him or treat him with the casual dismissal he'd grown accustomed to. Instead, they acknowledged him with gestures of respect, moved aside to let him pass, and spoke to him with the careful courtesy reserved for warriors. Several younger soldiers asked if they could observe him work, as if watching a human engineer perform diagnostics might reveal some secret combat technique. Threxva found him in the bay, staring at the place where he'd made his stand. Bloodstains had been cleaned away, but Kale's memory supplied the details anyway. "You are returning to duty?" the squad leader asked. "Modified duty. They want me on a rapid response team." "Good, you should not be wasted on routine maintenance." Threxva's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "I have commanded warriors for 17 years. I know what separates adequate soldiers from exceptional ones. It is not strength or speed or even tactical brilliance. It is the ability to function when every rational calculation says you should break." "I was terrified the entire time." "Yes, and you fought anyway. That is courage." The veteran soldier placed one of his 4 hands on Kale's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that transcended species. "The young warriors speak of you now. They call you Kale the Unyielding. It is meant as honor. I'm just a guy who panicked and got lucky. You are a human who demonstrated what your species is capable of when pushed to extremity. That is not luck. That is evolution." Threxva removed his hand and stepped back. "Whatever you decide about the contract, know that you have earned respect that cannot be taken back. You are warrior, whether you claim the title or not." Kale signed the contract that evening, partly for the money, partly because Zictra was right about him running toward danger, but mostly because he discovered something about himself during that chaotic engagement. He was better at protecting people than he'd ever been at protecting himself. The formal transfer ceremony took place a week later. Queen Shalavex herself presided, which was unusual for a simple contractor reassignment. But nothing about Kale's situation was simple anymore. The ceremony was held in the main hangar bay of the Queen's flagship, a massive vessel that made the outpost look like a child's toy. Hundreds of Velkhari soldiers stood in formation, their chitinous armor gleaming under the harsh lights. Kale stood at attention in his new uniform, still engineering orange, but with military insignia he didn't fully understand. Queen Shalavex addressed the assembled troops in her own language first, her clicking speech too rapid for Kale's translator to parse in real time. Then she switched to standard concordance for his benefit. "We have long understood that warfare requires strength, speed, and superior technology. The Archonate has built its military doctrine on these principles, and they have served us well." She paused, her antennae sweeping across the assembled soldiers. "But we have been incomplete in our understanding. We failed to account for a different kind of strength, the strength of a will that refuses to acknowledge defeat." She gestured toward Kale. "This human showed us what we had missed. When facing impossible odds, when wounded and outmatched, when every tactical analysis suggested retreat, he advanced. Not because he was trained to do so, but because his species evolved to survive through sheer stubborn persistence." The Queen's compound eyes fixed on Kale. "Kale Torrens is now formally attached to the Archonate military as a combat engineer with special operations clearance." But more importantly, he is a reminder that strength takes many forms. We will learn from his example. We will study how humans fight, how they endure, how they refuse to quit even when quitting is the logical choice. She raised one of her forearms in salute. And we will remember that the most dangerous weapon in any arsenal is not built in a factory. It is carried in the heart, the refusal to surrender, the bond with one's comrades, the determination to stand when falling would be easier. The assembled soldiers clicked their mandibles in unison, the Valkyrie equivalent of applause. Kale stood rigid, uncomfortable with the attention, but recognizing the significance of the moment. After the ceremony, as soldiers dispersed and Kale tried to process what his life had become, Zictra approached with her characteristic enthusiasm. "You are famous now," she announced happily. "The entire fleet speaks of you. They say humans are secretly the most dangerous species in the Concordance, and that we have been fortunate you chose to be our allies rather than our enemies. That's ridiculous. We're not dangerous. We're just persistent. Persistence that cannot be broken is danger in its purest form." She tilted her head in the gesture he'd learned meant she was being serious despite her cheerful tone. "You changed how we see your species, Kale. Before, humans were the clever ones who built good technology. Now you are the stubborn ones who will not die when they should. That is far more frightening. Great, we've gone from harmless nerds to terrifying murder apes." "Yes, it is an improvement." Zictra's antennae waved with amusement. "Though I still wish to try this coffee you speak of. If it contributes to your unkillable nature, it must be studied." "If I give you coffee, you're going to hate it and question why humans drink something that tastes like burnt sadness. Then it will be like your combat strategy, unpleasant but effective." Kale laughed, the sound echoing in the vast hangar bay. Around him, Valkyrie soldiers moved with purpose, preparing for deployments and missions he would soon be part of. His life as a simple contractor was over. Whatever came next would be more dangerous, more chaotic, and probably more painful. But as he looked at Zictra's enthusiastic expression and remembered Threxva's words about courage and thought about the soldiers who now treated him with respect instead of dismissal, Kale realized he'd made the right choice. He was still an engineer. He would still fix things that broke. He just also learned that sometimes the things that needed fixing were tactical situations, and sometimes the tools required were more primitive than a wrench. Somewhere in the depths of human evolution, his ancestors had developed the ability to keep fighting when any rational creature would flee. They'd passed that trait down through millions of years, encoded it in his DNA, wrapped it in cultural values about never leaving a comrade behind. Kale hadn't chosen to be dangerous. He'd just chosen not to run. And apparently, in a galaxy full of species with claws and armor and superior technology, that simple choice, to stand when standing seemed suicidal, was the most terrifying weapon of all. The word spread through the Archonate fleet in the weeks that followed, carried in whispered conversations and official reports, and the kind of stories that soldiers tell when they want to make sense of things that don't fit comfortable categories. Human, not softshell, not fragile, not weak. Human. And that word, spoken with a mixture of respect and unease, carried new weight now. It meant stubborn. It meant unkillable. It meant someone who would fight with bare hands if necessary and refuse to quit even when quitting was the only logical option. Kale Torrens had set out to be an engineer. He'd become something else entirely. A reminder that the most dangerous species in the galaxy might be the one that simply wouldn't acknowledge when it was beaten. And in the cold mathematics of warfare, that counted for more than claws or armor or any weapon technology could provide. It counted for everything,